Hi, I'm Josh, and I am so grateful that you've decided to spend some of your very valuable leisure time with me as I talk about the games that I played and purchased in the month of June. Overall, it was a fairly slow month in terms of the games played. However, I did get back to one of my old favorite games that I used to play on a regular basis about once a month, so I was super excited to get back to that. Let's dive straight into it. The first gaming session of June was a two-player gaming session with my primary board gaming friend, and the first game we pulled out was a game called Hardback, designed by Tim Fowers and Jeff Beck. This is actually kind of a re-implementation of an older game called Paperback that Tim Fowers had designed, and so they're both pretty similar games, and what they are is essentially a cross between the game of Scrabble and the game of Dominion. So this is essentially a word-building game that utilizes deck building as its primary mechanism. So players start off with a hand of basic letter cards. With those cards, they need to spell out words, and then the cards that are used to spell the words give the player some victory points and some kind of income to purchase other letter cards, and thus increase their hand size and acquire better cards and more letters to make more interesting and longer words, and thus kind of increase their potential for gaining points and gaining even more better cards. In terms of the differences between Paperback and Hardback, Paperback focuses a little bit more on the word creation side of the game, whereas Hardback here focuses a little bit more on the deck building aspect. So Hardback kind of has these book genres that when you collect multiple cards of the same genre and use them together in a word, they combine together for better effects in terms of more points and more income to spend. So it does improve the deck building aspect of the game. It also is a little bit easier to play because it introduces this mechanism where any of your letter cards in hand can be used as a wild card, essentially any letter you want it to be, by flipping the card over. What it means is that you don't get any benefits from the card, but you do get to use it to spell out a word that you might otherwise not be able to spell. So that's ultimately why I ended up selling my copy of Paperback and picking up Hardback when this one came out. Now, there is a bit of an issue that I've decided to house rule going forward in terms of the bonus points awarded to the player who spells the longest word during a game, because those points I found can be very swingy. I ended up winning our game by spelling the word querying, and that gave me the longest word bonus as well as a bunch of points and whatnot from spelling the word itself. And so there was kind of a lot of points that were kind of hanging on whoever can spell the longest word throughout the course of the game. Now, that is only one kind of additional module that you can add to the game or leave it out as you desire, and there are actually several interesting little variants that you can include with your games or leave out of them depending on how you want to play the game, which also makes it more interesting. I end up playing with most of them included because most of them I find are very interesting additions to the game. In terms of a rating, I give the game 7.5 out of 10. My friend that I played it rates it 7 out of 10. For anybody who enjoys word games, anything related to creating words with a random group of letters, this is definitely one that you really need to check out. The second game was one of my newer purchases that we had played, I think, in the previous month, and that is Maglev Metro, designed by Ted Alspach. And since I talked about it in my previous video, I won't go into depth. One thing that I did kind of fail to mention when I was talking about Maglev Metro in my previous video was just how amazing the physical components in this game are. It has these really cool, clear track tiles so that multiple players can build tracks in the same hex and without covering each other's tiles up. And it has these amazing metal train cars and wooden passengers and multi-level cardboard player boards where you slot in the passengers you pick up. And so a lot of aspects of this game are super well produced, but it does fall short in some areas in terms of the physical production. The worst part of the game is that the passengers themselves, the metallic robots that are gold and bronze, are super hard to tell apart without putting them literally right next to each other on the board to see which one is gold and which one's bronze, or wait, maybe they're both the same. So that definitely affects playability of the game, and there are some minor quibbles in terms of the player boards warping a bit and stuff like that. But overall, the production values of this game are pretty amazing. The rating I had given it on my first play was 7.5 out of 10, and my friend had rated it 8 out of 10. On my second play, I think I'm going to drop down my rating to 7 out of 10 rather than 7.5. I'm finding that the promise of the engine building aspect of the game ends up kind of falling flat. It doesn't seem to live up to its potential in terms of the couple plays I've had so far. In terms of looking over the game initially, it seemed like there were different interesting routes that a player could focus on in terms of the player boards to give them strengths in certain aspects of the game, and they could use those to focus on certain strategies. The reality is, though, that the gameplay, I think, is going to feel pretty similar from game to game. You're going to want to have kind of a general good spread of abilities, and you're not necessarily going to focus a lot on one ability to try to go hard on that specific aspect. Except the thing that I found was in my first play, I focused really hard on getting all of my bonus cards to score, because throughout the course of the game, you're always going to score one of your bonus victory point cards at the end of the game. But if you assign your passengers that you deliver to unlock your other 3 bonus cards, you can have up to 4 cards scoring. And in that game, I ended up really running away with it. I don't think the final scores were super close. However, in my second game, I decided to really shift my focus. I decided to see what would happen if I more or less ignored the victory cards aspect and focused really hard on just delivering passengers and unlocking the bonus points for delivering passengers and building tracks. And this time I ended up losing by a lot, and it got me thinking that you really have to make your focus the unlocking of those victory point cards, or else you're just not going to have a competitive final score in the game. So overall, the engine building doesn't really live up to expectations. However, overall, the game is still fun to play. It is the type of game I enjoy playing in terms of just building routes, delivering passengers, and upgrading your engine as you go. So it's one that I would definitely enjoy playing again, but it's not as amazing as I was hoping it would be. Next up was some more two-player gaming of Magic the Gathering, and this time I played with my sort of regular Magic playing friend, as well as with another friend who does dabble a bit in Magic. And this time around, I had actually gone on Facebook Marketplace and found this person who was selling off a whole bunch of packs of cards for real cheap. So I got all these packs and ended up playing a format that works out really well, that is not really a draft per se. What we end up doing is each player gets 2 packs of 15 cards. We open them up really without looking at them, shuffle those 2 packs together. That becomes the draw deck. And then from the deck, you draw 5 cards. You look at the cards you have in hand, and then you can choose any 2 lands to have any types of mana that you want to start the game with. And then going forward, as we play, at the beginning of every turn, you can choose to either draw off the top of your draw deck from those 2 packs that you shuffle together, or you can choose any type of mana you like. And it ends up working really well, because one of the big problems, I would say even the major flaw of Magic the Gathering, is this whole reliance on being lucky enough to draw enough mana that you can power the cards that you're playing without getting flooded with mana and having no cards that you can play. And this solves that issue by allowing players to choose exactly when and what type of lands they're drawing, and then the sort of luck of the draw comes from the deck that you're drawing from without even knowing what's in that deck. And it's always a fun surprise to see what you draw, and then you have to kind of make do with what you end up in hand with, and then just see how it all plays out, and it usually works really well. And like I've previously mentioned in other videos, I rate Magic a 7.5 out of 10. The final game that was played is the one that I was really, really excited about, because way back in the day, I used to be part of a group that would meet monthly to play No Limit Texas Hold'em. And we would generally play in a tournament format where players were eliminated when their chip stacks ran out. And we would usually pair the games of Hold'em with a UFC event that was on. So we would have the fights on in the background. We would play poker. If you got eliminated from the tournament, you could just sit and enjoy the fights and chat with your other friends there. And so it was always a really fun evening. And it's been at least a few years since we've done that. So I decided I really wanted to get back into it. I've started watching these live poker streams and was really getting excited to play poker again. So we ended up getting a total of, I think, 7 players together at my house. And we played a cash game format rather than a tournament format. So basically every player started by buying $25 worth of chips. And at any point throughout the evening, players could top up their chip stack by buying more chips as long as they didn't exceed the current highest stack at the table. So it was a very flexible format. No player was eliminated. You can buy chips at any time, or if you were eliminated, you could stop playing, although that didn't end up happening. We all, I think, played right through to the end of the evening. And it was so funny. I've been, like I said, watching all these poker streams and just picking up a ton of poker strategy in the process and realizing just how bad my game was in the past. I used to be just a super tight player and play kind of monster hands and fold everything else, which it's a decent way to not lose money, but it's also a decent way to not win money. So I decided with my new strategy knowledge that I would play a lot looser, that I would just get in there and gamble and have a good time and open up the possibility of losing a lot of money or winning a lot of money or coming up somewhere in between. And what happened was I ended up being the big loser of the 7 players on the night. We were playing 25-cent, 50-cent blinds, and by the end of the night, I think I was down about $50 on the night. Or in other words, I lost about 50 big blinds worth of money throughout the course of play. So it was kind of funny. Like, I ended up going through all this work to get this event organized. I did a bunch of baking, so there'd be lots of delicious snacks. I made kind of name tags for the table for the players who didn't know each other. And I did all this work and got this big game together, and I ended up just losing the most money. I didn't feel too bad about it, though, because I knew I was just giving money to my friends and it wasn't that big a deal. And next time we play, maybe I'll win some of it back, and maybe if we keep going on a regular basis, maybe the long run won't be too bad in terms of money lost, or maybe it'll just get worse. Who knows? In any case, it was just so fun to get back to some poker. I rate No Limit Texas Hold'em a 9.5 out of 10. It is just a super fun experience for me. As long as there's money involved, I could never play this game just for poker chips that were valueless, because that would just make it kind of a boring experience and just remove so much of the stakes and the strategy and everything else that goes along with the game. Now, just before I get into the games that I purchased for the month of June, let me take a quick second to send out a big thank you to my Patreon supporters, especially to my higher tier supporters, Joanna, Paul, and Asmondas Pervect. Your support, as you know, just means a huge amount to me. It really means a lot. It helps me to keep putting these hour-long book reviews up that take hours and hours and hours of work to record and prepare and edit and all that stuff. As much as you might not want to see an hour-long video, I don't know. But the point is, it helps to encourage me as I put all these hours into creating videos, so thank you so much. Now, in terms of games purchased, once again, I was digging into the local Canadian auctions on Board Game Geek, where people were auctioning off their used games, and I picked up a couple of bargains for roughly $10 each, or even just a little bit less than that. The first game I picked up was this little wee game called Mountain Goats that I had never heard of, but I saw these amazing goat meeples, and I looked into the fact that this game is a very simple to play game. It's a little bit reminiscent of the game Can't Stop, although it doesn't have the push your luck aspect of Can't Stop, which admittedly is the entire game of Can't Stop, but it does have the aspect where you're rolling dice and putting together numbers to move goats up the mountain and try to score points. I'm going to get into it when I talk about my games played in July, because we did get a game of this played, and so I look forward to talking about that more next month. The other game that I purchased was another little card game called Jump Drive. This one is designed by Tom Lehman, who also designed another card game called Race for the Galaxy that is super popular, although I have never played it myself. From what I understand, Jump Drive is kind of a Race for the Galaxy light. I believe it was designed by Tom Lehman to be a similar experience to Race for the Galaxy, but without all the complexity of that original game. And so I have not yet played this. I think I'm going to get to it this weekend, so once again this should come out in my July games played. Without having played Race for the Galaxy, I won't know how to compare it, but I'll just be able to talk about this game as far as how it stands on its own. I don't know what I'll end up thinking about it. It looks kind of interesting. I don't know if there's enough there to provide a lot of depth of strategy just based on reading the rules, but we'll see how it goes. So that was my month. What about you? Please do let me know in the comments what games you have been playing, what games you've been purchasing, or what's on your radar right now. Anything popping up on Kickstarter that's got your attention, or are you looking at any titles that are coming up in the near future that I should be checking out as well? Please, like I said, do carry on the conversation below. And thank you, as always, for watching. The preceding video has been brought to you free of charge by me, Josh. The only thing I ask in return is that you could do one of the following. Give me a thumb up, push the subscribe button, or share the link to this video with somebody who you think would enjoy it. Cheers. From the same designers called... Oh, I gotta turn off the f***ing AC unit. More by spelling, and just play really big. Maybe I'll win some of the back, or even less, a little.